Good morning, everyone. I'm out here harvesting a few things. It's going to be a pretty big preserving day. I have so many tomatoes I need to mess with. But before I go in, my zucchini plant here is actually ready to be pollinated. I have harvested a few zucchini. I've gotten a few questions on how is my zucchini going to be producing zucchini if it's covered in insect netting. You just have to hand pollinate it. So let me show you how I do that. So with the zucchini, there's two types of flowers. There's a male flower that doesn't have any fruit at the bottom. And then there's a female flower here where it's attached to a mini fruit at the very base, which I'll show you a little bit closer up in just a second. But what I do is I just actually take one of these male flowers here and I pull back all of the petals just to expose, oh gosh, I always forget what this is called, but I'm gonna take this middle portion here and just take it and pollinate the flower with it. Here is a better view. You can see how there is a small little zucchini. That is the female. I am gonna go ahead and prune off a few of these outer leaves here simply because the insect netting is an enclosure and these are just sitting right on top of everything and I don't want everything to be crammed. So I'm gonna take those ones off, give it to the chickens, and let's pull this back down. Here you go. I am quite literally swimming in a sea of tomatoes as we speak. I will probably be able to get majority of these processed this week. I'm having such a good tomato year, honestly. The last few years, I have not had that great of a tomato year, so the abundance honestly is a little overwhelming. This year, I really didn't want to freeze any of my tomatoes if I didn't have to. I have always freezed my tomatoes as I go, and then I do a huge process of tomato sauce at the end of the year. And I really just did not want to do that this year. I wanted to process them as I go. So then that way, once fall gets here and the gardening season is over, I can move on, I can do other things. I'm not worried about the summer harvest still. So today I am going to try to bust out a good amount of salsa. I've already shown you guys this process a few weeks ago. It's a little bit repetitive, but sometimes gardening is really repetitive, especially when you have an abundance of something coming in. This one right here is probably my biggest Roma tomato I have ever grown. It's bigger than the palm of my hand, which honestly is crazy. I grew 3 different varieties of Romas this year and I'm just very happy with the harvest. So let me stop rambling and let me get to it. I've already prepped my jars, my lids, my rings. I have been in this kitchen already all morning. It's been a handful of hours since I last saw you guys because I really just wanted to get all of my prep work done and then jump into prepping all of these tomatoes. So let's get to it. It's always interesting how some years are so abundant and then some years aren't. So I started by washing up my tomatoes. I needed a good amount of tomatoes today, so I was doing a triple batch of salsa, and that takes 21 cups of diced tomatoes. And one of my biggest tips when it comes to this is when you are dicing up your tomatoes and putting them into cup measurements, after each cup, tally on a piece of paper that you did that cup. It will really help you out in the long run, I promise you. You can get mixed up pretty quickly when you are chopping up that many tomatoes and time is just passing by, so that is one of my biggest tips there. Once all of the tomatoes were diced and ready to go, I got everything else I needed to chop. So I started with all of my cilantro. I needed a cup and a half worth of chopped cilantro. Unfortunately, I don't grow cilantro for the most part. It's really, really tricky to grow here for the simple fact we get hot really quick and we stay hot. Then I moved on to onions. So I actually grew my onions, my peppers, and my garlic, and I'm really excited that all of that is part of the salsa as well. But I got all that diced up and now it was time to start canning. So I got my jars ready to go. I also like to add vinegar to my stock pot whenever I am canning. This will really help keep your jars clear, especially if you have harder water. And as the jars were starting to warm up, I got everything placed into a stock pot. So I have all of my tomatoes here, my onions, my peppers, my cilantro, garlic. I needed 3 cans of tomato paste. I also needed some vinegar and also some cumin. So Once that all got into the stock pot, I got it mixed up really well and I got it all heated up. After about like 30 minutes or so, it thickens up a good amount and it's warm and ready to be canned. So now that it's time to can, I'm just taking out one jar at a time. I actually really enjoy using 8-ounce jars for salsa. It does take a little bit longer, but the 8-ounce portion is really nice just for single serve, or if you're just opening something up for like a taco night, then you're not having extra in the fridge if you don't need it. It's also really easy just to throw into lunches. So I really love to can up my salsa in 8-ounce jars. So that is what I did today. I was definitely canning for a long time. The chopping actually took a lot longer because I've never done a triple batch. And when you are chopping up that many stuff, it does take a good amount of time. But yeah, I just continued to follow that process and go jar by jar until all of my salsa was canned up. Got the first cantaloupe of this season this morning and it smells so good. Well, we got more tomatoes to add to the tomato table, even though there's no room. I'm really shocked I didn't make a bigger dent yesterday, but we're gonna try to make a bigger dent today. I'm really excited. I got a cantaloupe this morning. It smells so good. I was walking by and I was like, there has to be one ready to go. So cantaloupe will naturally detach itself from the vine when it's ready, and that's one reason why I really love those little melon cradles. Honeydew is not the same. Honeydew is new for me this year, and I've seen a few things that indicates when it's ready, and I feel like we're getting pretty close. But other than tomatoes and a cantaloupe, I got one cucumber. I will say I did have one jar last night that didn't end up sealing, so that's in the fridge. We needed salsa anyway, so that's fine. But we ended up getting a lot of salsa yesterday, which is really great. I think I might only end up doing maybe one more batch of salsa for the year. I'm already at 48-ounce jars and I think 8 or 9 pints. So I have a good amount of salsa already for the year. We got a cantaloupe. It smells good. So last summer I learned cats can have cantaloupe because I cracked one of these open and he just wouldn't leave me alone. So I did a quick Google search real quick, and apparently it's really good for cats and they love it. Everyone is winning today. The girls will get the rest of whatever's on here. So today I'm going to do crushed tomatoes. My goal is roughly 24 pints. We'll see exactly how many tomatoes are ready to be used today. I'm gonna go through the whole table and kind of touch and go. I really think I'll have enough to do 24 pints today. So I need roughly 33 pounds of tomatoes to get 24 pints worth of crushed tomatoes. And yesterday I used 15 pounds of tomatoes for all of that. It looked like I barely made a dent. I still have a lot of tomatoes that are ready to be used. So I'm going to go through the tomatoes, see exactly how many pounds we have. But today is crushed tomato day. This will definitely go faster than salsa. Salsa takes a while just because there's so many ingredients you have to chop. I had a lot of suggestions last time telling me to use a chopper, and my chopper is just super messy, so I just prefer to dice everything myself. But I was able to get 29 8-ounce jars in 1 pint. When I was finishing up last night, I noticed I probably had more than just one more 8-ounce jar, and I already had a bunch of jars clean, and I was able to fill up 1 pint, and I had the perfect amount of salsa for all of this. So yeah, 29 8-ounce jars and 1 pint. So now our total with salsa made for the year is 40 8-ounce jars, and I have 9 pints of salsa, which is great. For anyone new, I always love using my Ball Complete Book of Home Preserving. This book just really helped me get over the hunch and fear of canning, since all of these recipes are tried and true. I am not someone that plays games with canning. I'm not trying to die of food poisoning. So we are following the guidelines of the Ball Book of Complete Canning today. Here's the current state of all the tomatoes, and I'm really thinking majority of the white table is good to go today, so we should have plenty. I have found that I'm really enjoying doing more pints than quart jars when it comes to a lot of my tomato products this year, because typically, I mean, it's just me and my husband, so a quart is a lot, and if I need to, I can just grab 2 pints, but when it comes to like making pizza or like stews or chilies or anything like that, I just find a pint jar to be a lot easier. And a lot of recipes also go off of can measurement. So if a recipe calls for a can of crushed tomatoes, diced tomatoes, it's just easier to have a pint on hand. 4 on the dot. So I have 34 pounds of tomatoes here. With all of these getting processed today, as long as I get all of these processed today, we will have already processed 50 pounds of tomatoes, which I've already processed probably at least about 40 or 50 already as well. So we are definitely getting a good amount of tomatoes this year. I'm making up for the few years I had really terrible tomato years right now. Well, we got close to fitting all of the tomatoes on the table. We still have these over here. I also have some peppers that I need to get to, but oh, I forgot to show you guys this. It's a little heart tomato. I've never seen this. I would say I probably at least have another 50 pounds here. Okay, let's do this. I think working through this many tomatoes is going to take me, I'm gonna say an hour and a half, 2 hours. We'll see. We'll time it, but it will probably take me a little bit. After I get those tomatoes going, crushed tomatoes are such a fast process, so I'm really not too concerned. I definitely will not be canning as late as I was yesterday. I got done with my final batch of salsa, I think at like 9:30, and then I ended up having seal failures, so I processed one more time, and I still had 1 jar not end up sealing. I really haven't had many issues this year with lid failures. That's my second time I haven't had a jar seal, so honestly not too mad about that. There was a year, it was either last year or the year prior, I had so many seal failures, and I don't know if that was just me being newer to canning or if I just had really terrible lids, but I know a lot of people were having a lot of issues with ball lids that year. I still use ball lids, so who knows. But yeah, this is going to be a process. I'm honestly probably just going to throw you guys on time lapse since I've done this a few times with you now. I have boiling water. I'm gonna get some ice water going, and then I'm going to get these tomatoes washed, and then once they're washed, I cut an X at the bottom, throw them into boiling water for a minute, into the ice bath for a minute. That will shock the skins, allowing me to peel them pretty easily. And I'm just going to work through all of these tomatoes, and we'll see exactly how long this takes me. So it took closer to like 2 hours, 20 minutes, 2 hours, 30 minutes to get all of these tomatoes done, but they're gonna sit in this pot for about 5 more minutes and we're gonna start canning. So I already got all of my canning stuff situated. I have my citric acid, my vinegar, debubbler, jars are hot, clean, ready to go. So we are going to be starting canning in a second. Woo! So I have pint jars. I'm filling them to a 1/2 inch headspace. I will debubble it. If I need to adjust any of the headspace from there, I will. But I'll put 1/4 of a teaspoon of citric acid in each jar. Oh crap, I need to get my lids and rings. Lids and rings. I already have my rings cleaned and my lids clean. Lids and rings, got them ready. I'm gonna walk you guys through one of these jars. So what I'm going to do first is just take out one jar at a time. So I'm just gonna take my jar tongs here, get the water out of the jar. I do put vinegar in my water bath canner or pressure canner. That really helps the jars stay clean and clear. And then before I do anything else, I'm going to get my 1/4 of a teaspoon of citric acid, put it at the bottom of the jar, take my jar funnel and a good label. Having a nice big ladle, especially for tomato sauce days like this or salsa, perfect. So this is almost about 8 ounces. So I'll need roughly 2 of these. So we're gonna ladle it in. Then at that point, I'm gonna take off my jar funnel, get my debubbler tool here, make sure there's no air bubbles hiding, and then I'm going to check for a 1/2 inch headspace, which I am off. So I'm going to add a little bit more. Each time I take anything out of the stock pot, I'm gonna make sure I give it a good mix. That way you're getting an even ratio of liquid and tomato. I'm gonna add just a smidge more here. And then I'm going to double check my headspace again. Perfect. So now I'm gonna take a paper towel. I like to use paper towels for this step. I wash all of my towels, but I do have cats, so I like to stay as sanitary as possible with a paper towel. And with a little bit of vinegar, I will wipe that rim, take the dry end and make sure there's no remaining vinegar. I feel like that really helps make sure you get a good seal. The bottom of my debubbler has this magnetic tool. It's going to allow me to pick up one of my lids like this. I'm going to put that on top and center it. And then I'm going to take my ring and I'm gonna put my ring on and tighten it down, but don't do it too tight. If you do your ring too tight, it can actually end up, oh gosh, I'm drawing a blank as I'm speaking here, but you don't wanna make it too tight. Make it fingertip tight. And now I'm just going to continue to repeat this process. I'm able to fit 12 jars in this water bath canner here. So I'm probably gonna do a few batches. We'll see how much I have and kind of go from there. So once this is up to a rolling boil, oh my gosh, I will let this process for 40 minutes. In the book it says 35, but for me, my elevation is slightly higher. So if you don't know, depending on your elevation, you might need to tack on 5 extra minutes. You can find elevation out pretty easy by a quick Google search. So I will let these process for 40 minutes, and then once that 40 minutes is up, I will take off the lid from the canner, let those jars sit for 5 minutes to kind of adjust to temperature a little bit, and then I will take them out. Literally nothing left, and I got 24 pints. While all of that processes, I am going to collect eggs and get stuff watered real quick before the sun completely goes down. I will say the girls are using the loofah nesting pad, no problem. This is the first time I've never had issues with a nesting pad change out. Got 5 today. So 50 pounds of tomatoes down and roughly 50 more pounds to go. I'm taking a break today from doing anything in this kitchen. I'm going to process the rest of those tomorrow. But one thing I'm going to do is get these jars dated. So out of the 50 pounds I've already processed, I was able to get 29 8-ounce jars of salsa plus the 1 pint. And then I was able to get 24 pints of crushed tomatoes. I did have 2 seal failures. I had one with the salsa and then one last night with the pint of crushed tomatoes. I actually couldn't even attempt to reprocess the pint of crushed tomatoes for the simple fact I had no more crushed tomatoes left. I got so close. Here's what the tomato table is looking like, and I'm hoping to get those processed tomorrow. These are the ones I picked last night and this morning. I will not be dealing with these until probably sometime next week. I did get another cantaloupe this morning. I will honestly probably be getting a cantaloupe every day, every few days for the next few weeks. I just wrote crushed in salsa so many times that it just looks funky and weird to me, and the words sound so weird. So my biggest tip, if you're doing any canning, never throw away your jar boxes. These are great for transporting your jars or setting them somewhere. For me, I go to my basement. Everything's in my basement and I have stairs. So these are just really secure and it just really helps me take everything downstairs. All right, guys, good morning. I have overalls on because today's going to be a messy day. Tomato sauce day. It's probably one of the messier days as far as like tomato processing goes because the tomato press kind of makes a mess. But we are going to start tomato sauce this morning. What I need to do is clean the tomatoes, core them, get them in a pan. We're gonna get these all hot, ready to go, and then they will go through the tomato press. And once everything goes through the tomato press, then we just have to cook the sauce down for a few hours until it's reduced to roughly half. I already have 53 pounds of tomatoes over here. So in total, once we get these tomatoes processed, we will have 103 pounds of tomatoes processed. I have roughly probably 2 pounds I'm not gonna process today, and those were all the tomatoes I've grabbed over the last few days, but we are definitely putting a dent in the rest of the tomatoes today. If you don't know what a tomato press is, essentially this will just remove all of the skins and the seeds for me, so I'm not having to do any peeling of tomatoes today, which is great because I'm kind of over peeling tomatoes. But I actually just realized this is the first time I've ever done a tomato processing day with fresh tomatoes. Typically I'm using frozen tomatoes that I threw into the freezer and thawed out overnight. So yeah, it's a little bit different this year. All right, this is the last of the tomatoes I am adding, and I'm gonna get these softened up. And I'm actually gonna go outside and set up my tomato press. I always do this outside because it's such a mess, and we will run all of these through the tomato press in just a little bit. This is what 53 pounds of tomatoes looks like in a stock pot. You can see how they are definitely loosening up and breaking apart. All right, so we have our tomatoes here. We have our tomato press. And what I'm going to do now is put the tomatoes up in here. What it's going to do is take off the skins and the seeds and dump it here. I did create a little bit of a splash guard with some aluminum foil just because this doesn't come with a splash guard, but there's a lot of different food meals out there. This one is kind of pricey, but this one will process tomatoes really quickly. And if you also have like apples or an apple tree, that will also do applesauce. So what I'm going to do, I have my big stock pot right here. All of my sauce will flow into that stock pot there. So I'm just gonna take my ladle here and I'm gonna go ahead and fill up this first. Now I'm gonna turn this on. I have my little presser downer. And if I need to, I have my spatula here. I can scrape any of the juices. what I'm doing now is taking the skins and the seeds and I'm pressing them through one more time to get anything else out that we can get out of our tomatoes. So here's everything that got pressed out, and here is our sauce. Let's take this back inside. Now that this is inside, I'm going to get this reduced by half. This will probably take a little bit, so I'm just going to be doing some dishes, maybe relaxing a little bit, but I will be stirring this sauce. But yeah, we are going to let this reduce by half, and then once it's reduced, we will can it up. I started reducing this sauce at 2 o'clock. It is about to be 6, and we are really close to halfway. I wanted to reduce this by half. Last year I didn't reduce it fully by half, and I wanted to have a thicker sauce this year, so I really wanted to make sure I went halfway. So I really like this pot for the reason it has lines right here, and the lines are also indented in the inside, so it's really easy to see your measurement and not having to guess, because I feel like it's really hard to look here and then look here and be able to gauge it correctly. So I use just a little piece of tape so I could mark exactly where I started at the very top, and we are about roughly here, so we are about to be halfway. I'm gonna let this go for probably about maybe 15-20 more minutes, and then I am going to start canning finally. Sauce day is pretty quick in the front end of it, and then it's just a long day of making sure you continuously stir so nothing burns on the bottom and stuff like that. So we are very close to finally approaching canning time. Another thing I like to have on hand during like sauce day is just a rubber spatula, so you can go along the side, and as it reduces down you can scrape the sides, and that stuff doesn't dry up and then stay along the edge of the pot. It goes into your sauce because that's the thick part that you want. We just hit the halfway point of reducing, and I like the way it looks, so let's get this all canned up. This jar apparently has a crack right there, so I am not going to use this one. Once this comes to a rolling boil, we will process for 40 minutes. The book says 35, but again, I add 5 more minutes for my altitude. So let the canning begin. Well, that's never happened before. A lid completely came off. That is super disappointing. I've never had that happen. So that makes me really sad. I got pretty close on the sauce as well, which I honestly don't think I've ever gotten that close. All right, guys, it's the following morning and I was able to get 24, technically 25 pints, but we had that one little mishap. So The one thing I read was I probably just didn't put down the ring tight enough. When it comes to putting the rings on the lids, you want them fingertip tight, but you don't want them too tight, because if you do them too tight, the lid can buckle. But apparently this was the first time this has ever happened to me where I've had a lid come off during the canning process. So that was pretty interesting. So one thing I need to do this morning after I take off all of the rings is I need to clean up the jars that had that spillage, because if I were to not clean the jars on the outside, I could end up having issues with mold or something like that as they were in storage. So I'm going to show you guys what I'm going to do there. All right, so to get these 8 jars cleaned up, I'm going to take a little bit of soapy water, and then I'm also going to wipe them off with some vinegar right after. Even though we had the one jar just, you know, do its little thing, I was really happy that I had all of these jars seal. And here is what 103 pounds of tomatoes processed looks like. I am missing one 8-ounce jar of salsa because we already ate through that. That was one of the jars of salsa that didn't seal. I also have my 1 jar of crushed tomatoes over here that I put into the freezer because that one also didn't seal and I didn't have enough to reprocess it. But overall, I am so excited about this little haul going into the pantry. This is definitely my best tomato year I have ever had. I've been really trying to have a year like this for the last 3 years. What's crazy is this isn't even all of the tomatoes I've processed for the year already, and I have more tomatoes coming in. So I'm probably going to have at least another round of maybe salsa and crushed tomatoes. I'm not exactly sure. We will see. But overall, I'm really excited about this, and I appreciate you guys so much for joining me over the last few days as I processed all of these tomatoes. I'll see you guys all in the next one. Bye.